In today's video, I'm going to share with you 9 life lessons that 70-year-old retirees say they'd wish they learned before retiring. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, life lesson number 6 could cost you $100,000 or more in retirement. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And I'm also going to show you exactly how to avoid these life lessons and what to do if you're currently suffering from them. Now, life lesson number 1 is underinvesting in friendships. 1 in 3 older adults report feeling lonely. Social isolation is linked to measurable health decline and an estimated $6.7 billion in additional Medicare spending every year alone. Here's what happens. You retire, and the casual interactions that felt like having friends evaporate. The friendships that you thought were solid were really just held together by proximity and routine, such as work or where you lived. Now, I've talked to people who spent their first 2 years of retirement realizing that they really felt like they had no one to call. And that's 2 years or 3 years or 4 years of your life that you won't get back. So let's make sure that you're not going to waste that time. Now, your micro play for this life lesson is to call a friend and schedule a recurring monthly hangout, especially if you're retired currently and you kind of already feel like you have no one to reach out to. Make sure it's an actual calendar invite and not just a, hey, we should get together sometime. Now, your second step is, if you can, join a local group this month and then set a reminder to follow up with that group. It's especially helpful if they have monthly or maybe quarterly get-togethers that kind of force your hand and make you get out and talk to other people. The reason for this is we found that one-off coffee dates, while they're great and it's nice to catch up, don't really build that social capital that protects you and makes you feel good for the long term. Now, life lesson number 2 is not simplifying your financial accounts. Only 1 in 3 Americans even have an estate plan. Even fewer have updated beneficiary designations. So here's how that looks, right? Someone in your family dies, and then your family discovers maybe 7 bank accounts, 3 old 401ks, maybe a forgotten life insurance policy, or beneficiary forms listing an ex-spouse from 20 years ago. It can be a headache to say the least and a nightmare to say the worst. And, it's not done in malice. It's the way it is. And so now your loved ones and you are spending months, sometimes even years, playing financial detective in the middle of when you should be grieving. Now, when I talk to a lot of people and they've gone through this themselves, it's usually the kick in the butt that they need to make sure they get themselves organized in their financial affairs and their accounts. But here's what most people don't realize. The beneficiary designations will actually override your will. So a lot of people say, well, my will says this, but they have an old beneficiary designation from many, many years ago that they're not congruent. So if your IRA beneficiary form or your 401k says one thing, but your will says another, the beneficiary form is going to win every time. So your micro play here is to pull just 10-minute account inventory. List every bank, IRA, pension, life insurance policy, 401k account that you have, and just make sure you check to see all the beneficiaries on each of those accounts or documents. If you can, better yet, consolidate or label the accounts so that one of your family members, is able to understand where your finances are and where they need to look if something were to happen to you. Now, along those lines, life lesson number 3 that I hear all the time is not documenting healthcare wishes. Now, only 37% of adults have completed any kind of advance directive, which means that when something goes wrong and maybe they become incapacitated, maybe it's a healthcare issue or maybe a car accident, their family or your family are left guessing what they would have wanted. Do you want to be resuscitated? Who's going to make the decisions if you can't be resuscitated? These aren't fun questions and it's really not fun to think about, but the alternative is much worse in my opinion. It's your family making impossible decisions with no guidance from you, wondering forever if they did the right thing. So for families dealing with this right now without documentation, unfortunately, it is too late and they're bearing the consequences of that, which leads to confusion and conflict within the family. And I know that's the last thing you want for your family, but you can't prevent this from being your family's story. Now, your micro play here is to make sure that you do have your estate documents in order. At least you should have your will and healthcare directive and powers of attorney. If you do have it up to date, just take 10 minutes and review it to make sure that it does look good and it is aligned with your current wishes today, because how you felt 5 years ago may be very different than how you feel today. And make sure you tell at least one family member that you trust where your documents are. Now, here's where it's going to get interesting. The next lesson that we're going to learn about is about building optionality before you lock yourself into a retirement start date. So let's get right into that. Life lesson number 4 is fixating on a retirement date. So this obviously is a life lesson for everyone that's still working and trying to figure out when is the perfect day and time for me to retire. Now, about 20 to 25% of retirees still actually either work full time to some degree or part time. Some need the money, but many actually just miss the structure, the purpose, and the connection that goes along with work. So the life lesson isn't that working longer is bad. It's that you've probably spent 30 years optimizing for a specific year or month retirement start date, but you never really thought about building in flexibility or different income options once you get that time. The people who learn this the hard way spend their first years of retirement feeling kind of lost. Either it's the structure or maybe they're worrying about supplementing their income and not having enough income for the beginning part of their retirement or at the end part of their retirement if they have a long, healthy life. So let's make sure that you don't make this mistake. So your microplay for this life lesson is going to be to kind of run a test experiment when it comes to retirement. And you're really going to do this in two parts. The first part is, if you can, take a couple days PTO while you're currently working and live the life that you think you want to lead when you're in retirement. Whether that's golfing, trying to meet up with friends, and really try to put yourself into those shoes, right? I find that this test drive really helps people kind of analyze their situation and one, either say, I'm going to have my hands full and I'm going to be busy and it's going to be great. Or it's the latter and they say, I had nothing to do all day. I felt so bored. All of my friends were still at work. My family's in school or they just were busy. And I felt by myself and alone. And if that's where you find yourself, then it might be important to one, start looking at different hobbies that you can start or pick up to fill that void in that time. Or two, try to figure out maybe part-time work somewhere is something that might help you, not necessarily for the monetary aspect of it, which is always great, but something that's fulfilling and it keeps your day structured and it keeps you busy. As human beings, we thrive on structure even when it sometimes doesn't feel like we want to. And speaking of things that you're going to need to plan for early, the next life lesson is about your home and why it might actually be a trap rather than supporting you. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Life lesson number 5 is not planning for aging in place. Now, you've probably spent decades paying off your house without ever really asking the question, will this place work for me once I'm 75 or 85? And what are my family dynamics going to look like when I'm that old? Most people don't think about accessibility until they really need it. If you have a bedroom on the second floor, maybe a bathroom doorways are too narrow for a walker, no grab bars in the bathroom, and you just have steps everywhere. And by the time your mobility becomes an issue, your options are either expensive emergency renovations, moving in a panic, or even worse, getting trapped in a house that you just can't safely navigate, leading to potential health issues later on. Now, the people learning this life lesson right now might be burning through a lot of cash. I mean, one renovation to make a house more health adaptive could cost $20 to $35 to $55,000, especially if you're trying to rush it with the modifications that you're doing. Or worse, they might be trying to sell their home, the home that they love and that they maybe raised a family in, because in a crisis, they waited too long and felt like they need to do something now to make up for it. And we obviously want to avoid you feeling like this or putting yourself or the rest of your family into a position that just makes things worse. So here's the thing, sometimes the right answer isn't modifying your current house at all. If you are in a 2-story colonial house with a postage stamp lot, you might be better off moving to a single level ranch or a maintenance free community where someone else is handling the yard, the snow, and the different repairs on the outside. But some people just don't really run the analysis of what this is going to look like until they're forced to. Maybe it's a bad hip or a bad knee, and all of a sudden, the home that they loved and that they raised their kids in just isn't going to be supporting them anymore. And it's really might be hurting or trapping them. And if you don't think that aging in place modifications are expensive, I mean, a basic grab bar to have a contractor come in right now is between like $300 and $500. Installing non-slip flooring to your bathroom might be $35,000, or doing full remodels, especially if you're doing a chairlift or a bedroom relocation or something like that. So what you're going to want to do is run the numbers between how can we make your current home accessible and adaptable to your current situation versus what would it look like to put it on the market and try to find a retirement community that's going to better suit you and your needs now, but in the future. So your microplay for this life lesson is, let's do a 15-minute accessibility audit of your current home. Ask yourself, can I access a bedroom or my bathroom or the kitchen on one level without stairs? Okay. So if you do have stairs, are the doorways and the stairwell, is it wide enough for mobility aids? Some houses you can't even put in a chairlift if you wanted to. So, like I said, these probably aren't the kind of concerns that you might be thinking about right now, But what I encourage you is to try to, put yourself in your shoes in 10 or 15 years from now. We've all unfortunately had issues where maybe we broke a bone, a leg, an arm or something, and you realize how difficult it makes life very, very quickly. So this life lesson is just hopefully a little kick in the butt to get a little proactive when it comes to these things, because the last thing you want to be is 85 years old and trying to move out of your house that you've been in for 30 years. Now, if you're planning to retire early, this next life lesson is critical. And most people, unfortunately, completely miss it. And so life lesson 6 is going to be ignoring healthcare gaps before Medicare kicks in. Now, if you're planning to retire early before age 65, you've probably maybe underestimated what healthcare is actually going to cost you without your employer coverage. So you might know that once you leave your employer or retire, COBRA will run for 18 months after you retire. Then after that 18 months, chances are you're probably going to look at the ACA marketplace plans, which can cost thousands of dollars per month, especially for a couple in their early 60s, often with higher deductibles than you would like. And if you need ongoing prescriptions or have a chronic condition, that gap in the expense gets even wider and faster. And unfortunately, I have seen that some people learning this lesson where they retire earlier, and all of a sudden these health bills kick in, and it forces them back to work or back to part-time work just to help supplement either their private insurance, or hopefully they could actually get healthcare coverage as a part-time worker through their employer. Now, I talk a lot about healthcare on my channel, but obviously the one thing that you can look at is your modified adjusted gross income and what you expect that to be, to see if maybe you can qualify for some ACA health insurance subsidies, which can oftentimes really help kind of ease the sting of the healthcare costs pre-Medicare age. So your micro play for this life lesson, if you're planning to retire before 65 and your spouse doesn't have healthcare coverage for you and themselves, is to go on the marketplace website and look at real quotes. Put in your age, date of birth, your modified adjusted gross income, what you expect that might to be, and get actual quotes based on your zip code and where you live, because where you live actually changes what you can expect as far as a premium goes for your healthcare coverage. And then make sure you go ahead and you factor in these bridge years into your budget and your retirement plan. If you're watching this and realizing that you don't want to waste years trying to figure all these different factors and life lessons out on your own, and you really want help building a comprehensive retirement system around these 9 different areas, and not just checking a box or just having someone manage your portfolio, I've put a link in the description below. Or you can scan the QR code right here on the screen to schedule a call with my team and see if we might be a good fit to work with each other. All right, back to our life lessons. And this next one is one of the numbers that most people have never looked up, but they are thinking about in some degree, because it can totally change the trajectory of your retirement. And so life lesson number 7 is avoiding realistic long-term care costs. So what does care actually cost in your area right now? Not just the national average that you might have Googled once or 5 years ago, but the actual current cost of home health aides, maybe assisted living or different memory care within your zip code. Now, just taking a look at Genworth's 2024 survey, home health aides or homemaker services can run thousands of dollars per month. Assisted living can be even more than that. And most people never price this out until they really need it. And we're talking maybe $75,000 to $100,000 a year in today's dollars. Unfortunately, the people that are learning this lesson right now without any preparation might be making panic decisions with incomplete information, whether it's burning through their assets faster than they planned, or just putting general stress on themselves or their loved ones on trying to figure out how they're going to be able to support them in their later years of life. But you still have time and can plan for this accordingly. So here's your micro play, is to research current long-term care costs in your area. Maybe it's even calling 2 local providers to get real quotes. And then you make sure that you integrate these numbers into your retirement plan or your strategy and make sure they're inflation adjusted. That's really important. And if you don't have long-term care insurance or maybe a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider, you're going to need to reduce your planned monthly retirement spending just slightly. It's not a lot, especially if you're at the front end of retirement, to adjust to be able to self-fund for a future care event later on in life. Make sure you build these assumptions into your plan now and not just when you need it later on in life, because once you're there, it's unfortunately probably too late and you're just going to be burning through your assets. And really, this isn't about just committing to a plan, which that is important. It's about replacing this vague anxiety with actual numbers and a funding strategy. And I promise you, by doing that, it's going to make you feel so much better and so much more relieved that you're confidently planning for something rather than just worrying about it. Which brings us to our next conversation, and it's about a conversation that you've more than likely been avoiding. So, life lesson number 8 is skipping money conversations with your adult children. So, I understand that this life lesson and this topic in general can sometimes feel like an uncomfortable one. A huge proportion of families experience serious disagreements around inheritance, especially when there's no clear plan communicated ahead of time. These conversations can feel awkward, right? But when you avoid them, your kids are left guessing. They don't know what you want. They don't know what you can afford or what they can afford for you, or who's going to handle what when the time comes. And unfortunately, this tends to lead to fighting or bickering within the family. And not necessarily just because they're greedy and they want more of your assets, but because they're kind of operating in a vacuum and they're trying to learn and process as they're supposed to be leading the family. Unfortunately, I have seen families permanently fracture over this, right? Siblings who don't speak together anymore because they had to guess what their parents wanted. And even worse, sometimes siblings disagree with what they think mom or dad would have wanted. And that can cause a divide that sometimes is never healed. But you can prevent this outcome right now. And that's going to be the intention for your microplan. And that's going to be whether by yourself or with your financial advisor, is to schedule a 30 or 60-minute family meeting. These family meetings can go as deep as you want or as high level as you want. And oftentimes we recommend keeping a high level, especially for the first one, where you're really just trying to set the intention with your family of discussion. And maybe you're not running through the entire numbers of your estate plan. Now, one agenda item I would recommend for this family meeting is to, at a high level, discuss who's going to handle finances and healthcare decisions if mom and dad can't. Now, this life lesson isn't the quickest one on the list, right? You're coordinating between family members. You're going to have to think through what you're comfortable talking about and then deciding who should be in the family meeting. Do you want to include spouses of your children or maybe not? Do you want to include your financial advisor, your estate attorney? Maybe or maybe not. At the end of the day, you have to do what's going to be most comfortable for you and what is going to make the entire process as enjoyable as possible for you and your family. And finally, life lesson number 9, unfortunately, we're ending on a sadder note, is going to be neglecting mental health. Depression and anxiety aren't going to disappear once you retire, unfortunately. Maybe they subside if it's directly linked to work, but for many, they sometimes even get worse because the structure and the purpose of work kept those symptoms at bay, or at least kind of under the carpet while they were focused on work. Recent CDC data shows measurable prevalence across adult age groups when it comes to this. But early treatment does work. Waiting, unfortunately, doesn't, and oftentimes it makes it much worse. But many people assume that therapy or medication is for those people that are really only struggling. And it's not for me, it's for other people that need it more than me. So they wait or they just never address it. And by the time that maybe if they ever do ask for help, their problem is so entrenched that it becomes so difficult to really help. For people who waited too long, they've already lost years of quality life to untreated symptoms. But you don't have to waste the time that they did. So your microplay for this life lesson is to go on and take a short online screening survey. Whether it's the PHQ-9 or the GAD-7, they take like 5 to 10 minutes, and it's going to actually help flag anything, whether it's depression or anxiety, to help you then be able to address it. And to make things even easier, nowadays, you can schedule a 30-minute telehealth consult over your phone or your computer. And I tell people, try to treat this like just a normal, regular health checkup, right? If you're able to address it early on and feel better, continue to make sure you're addressing it and don't let it fall by the wayside. Because things and symptoms like that can creep back much quicker and sometimes even much more aggressively. So let's make sure we tie this all together, right? Some people are learning these life lessons right now, and they're in the thick of it, and they're learning the hard way, unfortunately. For them, it might be too late, but I don't believe it's too late for you. You haven't wasted all your social capital yet. Your accounts haven't become a maze for your family yet. Your retirement plans aren't locked in stone. Your house hasn't trapped you in yet. And your healthcare gap hasn't forced you back to work maybe. The people who don't waste these learning years, learning these life lessons the hard way, are the ones that are going to be able to enjoy this time and really maximize it for themselves, their family, and their friends. So I really encourage you to pick 1 or 2 or 3 micro plays and execute on them. Do it this week and then pick another 1 or 2, maybe the following week, so that you're not, exhausting yourself or trying to overhaul your entire life, but you're also not refusing to waste it learning life lessons that you might have been able to see coming. I hope today's video was enjoyable and at least valuable nonetheless, and I'm excited to see you in the next video. So thank you.